What's going on, everybody? Welcome to the Week 16 edition of the Pro Football Focus Show here on RotoGrinders. We're back, right? You maybe missed us last week. I was off getting married, doing some adulting, and back with a vengeance, ready to pick up the NFL this week. Here with my man, Daniel Kelley from PFF. Daniel, before we get into football, man, I need some advice, right? Newly married over here. You're doing the whole thing. You've got kids and all that stuff. Well, what's the best advice you got for me or the other listeners out there?
Well, first what I can tell you is don't have twins. That's
Yes.
a little down the road, but don't do it. For marriage stuff, all I can say is they always say happy wife, happy life, but I prefer happy spouse, happy house. You got to be happy too. As long as everybody's happy, everybody's happy. That's how it works.
So, yeah, that's a good twins. Yeah, a good hat tip to you, my friend. I guess
I'll tell you what.
You just want one, two come out, right? Then your whole world flips upside down.
I told her, I said, I just want to have a kid. And we decided we'd have a kid. And then we did not have a kid. We had kids. And I love them. They're wonderful. And oh, my God, don't do it.
All right. So after the marriage advice, I'm glad to be back here. I sort of missed, I wasn't allowed. Maybe not allowed. I was nice enough, right? I put DFS down. I didn't really pay any attention to it while I was gone on like our little wedding week. But I'm back with a vengeance, ready to have some fun. But Daniel, I need to know what happened last week. We got Scott's article here from Pro Football Focus Up. A couple of guys we want to talk about here. A.J. Brown, Terry McLaurin. What's been dug up on these two dudes? These rookies look like they're going to be legit.
Well, yeah, early on in the year, A.J. Brown had his few fits and starts where he's having those big games, but it was all efficiency. He was getting 5 targets, taking 2 for 100 yards, and that's great. You love that, but that's not something you can count on. Well, lately it's turned around. He's seeing the efficiency still like crazy. He has the second highest yards per route run of any rookie in a decade. He's third in yards per route run across the league this year. But he's getting the targets too. He's at 6+ targets each of the last 5 games, something like that. His quantity is now meeting the quality. Put those together, and we actually have a bona fide fantasy option on our hands.
Yeah, get rid of Marcus Mariota and Ryan Tannehill, who has had this late season resurgence. You get him, giving him actual good targets, and A.J. Brown looks sort of like the receiver he did in college, sort of like a pretty unstoppable force. We'll have to see how he progresses through his NFL career. The other guys, Terry McLaurin, both these guys I think are in play this week in DFS. McLaurin, what do you got on him?
Well, he is right now just under 1/3 of the Washington yardage for the year. He's at 33.2%. That would be the rookie record across the PFF era, which is basically the last decade. The previous record was Mike Evans in 2014 at 31.9%. Now, part of that is, of course, the Washington offense is god-awful, but still, McLaurin is the guy in this offense. You're going to be going to him, and it's working. He had a little lull in the middle, but he's come back the last couple of weeks.
Yeah, Haskins starting to get a little bit more comfortable. A good matchup this week. We'll talk about those guys as we progress through the show. What we want to do, we're going to talk a little Saturday. We're going to mix it in with all the other stuff. So there's no Thursday sort of segment today. But I want to go to the bets here. And, I was talking to you pre-show. The lines move on these so fast. You got to, if you want to get, if you think you're sharp and you want to get action in on the good side of a line, you got to bet these things Monday, Tuesday. We're doing this Wednesday. I was looking at a couple of these. One of my favorite ones of the week was the under in the Steelers game. I looked at it last night. It was 38.5. I'm like, perfect, right? I go to write it up this morning. It's at 37.5. I'm like, it's okay. I pull up green line. It's already down to 37. The sharp action's coming in all over this. If you can get it, I still think 37 is pretty good, but the Pittsburgh defense is legitimate. They're one of the best defenses in the league. Their offense can't score at all. I'm not sold on anything going on the Jets side of the ball, too. Le'Veon Bell revenge. I don't even know if it's going to be possible for him to get any revenge against the Steelers. I wanted the under. The lines moved really good towards the under, but I still think there's just a little bit of a juice left. So this was probably my favorite bet. Much, much more like this at 38.5 when I was looking at it on Tuesday.
Well, I think you asked me a question, but you broke up, so I'm just going to talk.
All right.
I do like the under in that game. I don't know if they can make it low enough, but at the same time, that Jets +3 line, I just don't see how Pittsburgh can score. We did just see the Jets sign Kenneth Dixon straight to their active roster, which makes me wonder a little bit Le'Veon Bell's health. But either way, I don't see the Steelers being able to score enough to cover a spread. So I'm going to go with the under and the Jets to cover in this one.
Yeah, another game you like too. You want to parlay the under in this one with that Bills game. You
Absolutely.
like the Buffalo 6.5 side too. Simply you just can't. They're not going to score any points, so you just take the team getting the points because there's just not going to be any points scored in the game to begin with.
We haven't seen the Patriots offense do much in a month now, so I don't know how they can cover a 6.5 point spread against anybody. The Bills might not score many points either, but if the final score is 10-7, the Bills covered, so we're fine with that.
Yeah, and then the Tom Brady noodle arm, he's had trouble with that elbow, I think, for several weeks now. He can't throw. Julian Edelman, he isn't healthy. Who's actually going to catch the passes? So, yeah, I like Buffalo. I'm not expecting Buffalo to really have a big scoring game, but almost a touchdown. It is a road underdog. But, yeah, I think there's just not going to be many points scored in that game. So taking the team, getting the points, I think is pretty smart. Moving it to a couple of other games I was interested in. This over on the Redskins game. So it's 42.5 against the Giants. And I don't know. We just talked about Terry McLaurin. I like offense in this game. It's down to 41. So maybe there's some weather I'm not, that might be coming that I don't know about. But if it's down to 41 now, Daniel Jones is coming back. I think he's an upgrade over Eli. He's got legitimate targets all over the field. Saquon's back. The Redskins, Haskins looking good. He's got, maybe one real target, but there's enough guys to spread the ball around. AP's going to do his thing. This looks like a clear over to me. I just don't think there's going to be much defense in this game.
Yeah, it's hard for me to not see a way they score a lot of points in this. It might not be pretty. It might not be fun. Jones might have 2 fumbles and 2 interceptions, but those can lead to points too. I think the over is a good call here.
Yeah, I like that one. And then the other one is I just think Arizona, they're plus 10. I think it has come down a little bit here. Let me pull up and see what the most recent line is.
I saw it at 9.5.
Yeah, it's 9.5. I'll still take that one. I like the 10. That's one of the key numbers here, but I'll still take the 9.5. I just think their offense is good enough. The Seattle defense is bad enough. I got to make sure Christian Kirk plays. He sort of played through the injury tag last week. He's sort of doing the same thing this week. But I think Kyler Murray's good enough. Kenyon Drake's looking good. I just think the Cardinals are going to be competitive enough to cover that. I like that 10, but 9.5 still sounds good.
I don't love that one as much. I can see Seattle just coming out and having that 1 seed in their sights and rolling over them. Arizona's been so inconsistent. All
right. Well, we disagree. We agree on 4 and disagree on 1. I guess
that's a nice ratio.
Yeah, I'll take that. If we go 4 and 1 combined, hey, we're how do we do it? Right? How do we do it? All right. Let's go to quarterbacks. We're going to mix in some plays from Saturday as well on here. I guess we'll start off on this one. Just a take from you at each position on something about the Saturday games here. So what do you got for me on this early slate? It's a 3-game slate. DraftKings is $1 million tournament. A lot of people are going to be playing this. And
it's some interesting games. We like the Thanksgiving slate had a bunch of crap teams plus New Orleans. This one is a very interesting slate. But I just want to talk a little about Josh Allen, who, we always talk about how high a floor he has and his rushing makes him fantasy relevant regardless. And that is absolutely true when he's not playing New England. He's played 20 games since he came back from injury last year, and his worst and third worst games in that time were the 2 games against the Patriots. He has scored a total of 10, or an average of 10.2 points against the Patriots, 21.5 against everybody else. I know we see his rushing. We think he has a high floor. I would not even come close to touching him this week.
Yeah, just he's the goal line back / quarterback, but that Patriots defense, it's still pretty good. They're at home, and they know they have to play defense because I think they realize Tom Brady might be on his last legs, at least for this season. Maybe his down performance is a little bit injury related. Josh Allen, Tom Brady, I'm not really interested in that. The question is, right, Daniel, how do we differentiate? Because everyone's going to be playing Watson. Everyone's going to be playing, Jameis Winston, even though he doesn't really have any receivers. We can't really use any other quarterbacks this week. The ownership on those two is going to be so high. Do you see anything from that Rams game worth using?
You could talk me into a situation where you could use Goff as a contrarian sort of thing, just because the 49ers have actually let up a lot of passing production in the last couple of weeks. It would mostly be contrarian. It mostly just be to pivot off those big high-owned guys, but I can see the argument for it.
All right, let's talk a little bit about Sunday. I'm going to start. I want to talk about Kyler Murray. I mentioned I like that Cardinals plus 10, plus 9.5. Well, part of that's because I like Kyler Murray, who, a lot of people used him last week, apparently. I was gone. But he was the talk of the town, and he would have had a nice game if Kenyon Drake didn't steal all 4 of his touchdowns. So I think Kyler can have a pretty reasonable game here. Seattle's allowing the 4th most passing yards in the year, the 6th highest pass success rate, and looking at the PFF pass rush grades, right, they can't really get any pass rush. I know Arizona, that's one of their faults. They're 29th in pass rush grade on the season over at PFF, and they're the 2nd lowest pressure percent and sack rate on the season. So I think Kyler Murray's going to have some time. If he has some time too, he can scramble. I just think Kyler Murray's in store for a pretty good game. I like Seattle to put up points too. right? So I think he's going to have to pass as maybe in the fourth quarter, get some extra yards, maybe a garbage touchdown or something like that. But Kyler Murray looks pretty good to me. I know we've got Lamar Jackson. We've got a couple other expensive quarterbacks. We've got Russell Wilson, and there's some other guys you can mix in there. But, going down to Kyler Murray to save a couple of bucks off the high-end names looks pretty good to me, Daniel.
I like him as a tournament play, not as much in cash. He's been so boo and bust this year. This past game, first time all year he's had exactly one touchdown pass. It's all been zero or multiple, and it's that high range of outcome is just it scares me a little for cash games. But tournaments, I think there's a lot of upside there.
Yeah, he's running. The running quarterbacks are like the statue of Phillip Rivers, right? You just can't really use those guys in tournaments anymore. You got to use quarterbacks that are a little mobile. And I think you want to talk about maybe the most mobile quarterback of them all here on Lamar Jackson.
Yeah, it feels so boring to say.
$8K on DraftKings. I don't know if you saw that price. He's expensive.
Yeah, I did. He's expensive, and that's the down mark. But I mean, if ever there were time for him to come out for revenge, one of their two losses, that crazy loss against the Browns, he still threw for 3 touchdowns and ran for 66 yards against them. They're still trying to lock up that 1 seed. Yeah, I'm not going to touch him in week 17 because I assume everything will be locked up then. But I think one last time we're going to see a big game out of him this week, and I'm all for it.
Yeah, if the Patriots lose, I think they lock up. There's some the 1 seed, or maybe the Chiefs can still catch them.
I think they lock up a bye, but they don't lock up the 1 yet. I think they still have to wait for the Chiefs to lose.
It's going to be all hands on deck is kind of what I was going to get to for the Ravens this week. So I wouldn't expect anybody to sit. If they win this game, they have the 1 seed. They're going to be going all out. That $8K price tag. I mean, we got a quarterback that's half price of that. Basically, we're going to talk about in a little bit. But the $8K price tag, DraftKings said no more. $7,400 Lamar Jackson getting 35 fantasy points every week. They jacked the price up. $8K is a lot for a quarterback, but you can make that work. We got some value at running back that's going to appear for sure. So keep your eye on him. I want to talk. I got another running quarterback. I mentioned I like the over in that Redskins game. Now, Stephen A. Smith, it's not Dwayne Haskins, right? The mobile quarterback that Stephen A. Smith thought he was. I'm talking about Danny Dimes. He can run a little bit. It's looking like he's going to be back. Good targets all over the field. Saquon's there. I worry a little bit. The Redskins pass rush is pretty legit, but they're 22nd in coverage grade at PFF, the 8th highest expected points added on pass plays allowed, according to our Gridiron IQ tool here at RotoGrinders. And I just think Danny Dimes, he has this ceiling ability. We've seen he can give you 13 or 14 DraftKings points, but he's dropped 30-plus multiple times this season. And I know they still don't have Evan Ingram, but there's plenty of ways for him to get it done. And I really think the whole key is going to be Saquon looks back, and I think the offense should hum against Washington this week.
Yeah, his boo and bust games have been very predictable this year. It's if he plays against a team that has a good pass coverage, he struggles every time. And if he plays against a good one, if he plays against a good pass coverage, struggles. Bad pass coverage succeeds. That's pretty much it. And Washington has a bad one, so I can see him having a big old game this week.
Yeah, I like him. You got a couple other value quarterbacks here. We got Fitz, and let's hash out Will Grier. Not a very good PFF graded quarterback in the preseason. I believe I saw some tweets. He was the actual worst graded preseason quarterback, but I don't know. They need some evaluation. I think they're just going to let him come in and chuck the ball. So I think he's pretty interesting at 4,300.
Yeah, 4,300 is the main selling point here. The Colts defense has fallen apart lately. They've allowed the most fantasy points to receivers the last 2 weeks, so you got to imagine Grier has a chance to take advantage of that. Our Scott Barrett absolutely loved Grier coming into the league. It's obviously gone away a lot because Grier took 3 months to oust Kyle Allen from the job, but everything that was there about him before still is there. We could see it. I'm not sold by any means, but at 4,300, you can afford to spend up a lot elsewhere, and it makes him interesting.
Yeah, you get 200 and a touchdown, right? That's a horrible game for a quarterback, and he's almost at 3x. So that would give you 12 DraftKings points. Now, if he gets a couple of running yards, let's say he gets 2 touchdowns or 225, right? There's a lot of ways for him to get there, even with a mid-teen score, because now you're able to jam in Michael Thomas and Christian McCaffrey and Saquon and all that, and it's really interesting for lineup construction this week. So I think he's in play. If you don't want to go that deep, can I interest you in Fitzmagic? This is a very interesting game, right? Both these teams, I think, want to lose. Who wants to lose harder?
Well, I can absolutely guarantee you Ryan Fitzpatrick never wants to lose.
Yes,
because we love
agree.
Ryan Fitzpatrick. He has put up 20-plus in 3 of his last 4, 5 of his last 7, 6 of his last 9. Dude has actually had a genuinely good season. They're the favorites, but they're only by 1 in a game that we could actually see a fair amount of points scored. And he, we talked about the rushing. He rushes more than you expect. He's actually the Dolphins' leading rusher this year, which is hilarious. And it's just that I think he's got crazy upside for the price.
Yeah, I can definitely get behind Fitzpatrick, and I agree. If the Dolphins win, like they're have a very good chance of the 2 seed if they lose, or the number 2 pick, but they can drop really fast in the draft if they happen to win this game. So it's interesting. The players are going to want to win. They still have to put out good tape. And you mentioned Ryan Fitzpatrick certainly wants to win, and I would tend to agree with that. So I think he's very much in play. We talked about Will Grier. I want to talk a little bit about Russ Wilson too. So he's 1,000 less than we got Lamar Jackson out there, but I think you could probably use him. I think I'd still prefer Lamar Jackson. I think he's extremely safe, and there's ways. You mentioned Seattle, right? Can go out and just completely crush Arizona. But I pulled these again. I didn't pull these. I found these on Twitter. I wish I put the name in my copy paste that I have here, but. So this is the Arizona defense. They've allowed the most passing touchdowns, the most passing yards, and the 4th most rushing yards to quarterbacks. If I think Arizona can keep this game reasonably competitive, I think Russ might have to throw. Tyler Lockett's going to go nuts. Jacob Hollister is going to score at least 3 touchdowns. I've seen a chart on the internet that says that. So I think we can play Russ pretty easily. You can stack him with Lockett. DK's a little cheaper. You got Hollister. You can play Carson in the stack too. It's really easy to figure out which players you want to play with Russ.
Yeah, the stacking options really, yeah, you're right about that. My problem with Russ is that he's only been a top 10 quarterback twice in the last 9 weeks. Since week 7, he has only 2 top 10 finishes. He has 5 finishes lower than 15. So he's been surprisingly boomer bust for who he is, and that makes me a little worried.
All right. And speaking of bust, the point chasers, you say no to Drew Brees. Now, I like Michael Thomas, but you're telling me not to play Drew Brees?
It's just, he's on the road now. We know he has those home road splits. He's going to be crazy popular after how good that game was in the prime time where he was the only thing on site. So the Titans have only allowed 16.7 points per game to quarterbacks over the last 4 games. He worries me a little bit. I still think he's going to be good because he's Drew Brees, but I just don't think he's got that crazy ceiling this week.
All right, let's move to running backs, and I guess we can start real quick here on the Saturday games. And you want to bring up a good point on Duke Johnson. Carlos Hyde still didn't practice, I think, on Wednesday as we were recording this. The pass-catching backs work pretty good. You don't really run on Tampa Bay. And, I mean, if Bill O'Brien's a smart coach, you got to think he could if we can come up with these things looking at PFF and looking at Gridiron IQ, right? Like, we're not geniuses. You got to think an NFL head coach would understand maybe you want to get Duke Johnson the football.
Yeah, I mean, it's the nice thing that DraftKings does is you're looking at the things and it gives you the little green or red. This is a good matchup, bad matchup. You look at Houston against Tampa Bay and it says bad matchup, don't do it. Running back's terrible. Except that's not altogether true for a pass catching running back. They have allowed the fewest rushing yards per game, but they actually allowed the 12th most receptions per game to running backs. It's PPR scoring. He's priced down to 4,100. I think he's a sneaky option this week.
Yeah, the ownership on him looks like he's going to be in about a quarter of the lineups. We've got our Saturday ownership up for that. And the running back group as a whole it leaves a lot to be desired, right? Todd Gurley against San Francisco. Gurley's going to be playing a lot of snaps. I could still see you play him. You got Raheem Mostert going up against the Rams. I actually like that one after Zeke and Tony Pollard went nuts all over him. Mostert doesn't get all the volume that you really want, but if he's going to get 15, 16 touches, and it seems like he's getting in the end zone every week, that sounds pretty good. Pick a name out of a hat of a New England running back you might want to play. You got 3 of them to choose from. Maybe one of them has a good game. I mean, the running options are they're not great, so I think you could definitely get a little frisky with Duke Johnson. I like that one quite a bit.
You could also talk me into, if you really felt like it, Devin Singletary. Mm-hmm. Patriots have been vulnerable to the run a few times. We just saw it last week with Joe Mixon. So I don't love taking any offensive weapon against the Patriots, but I'd rather use a running back than a passing game option in that one. So I could see a little taste of Singletary.
All right, let's go. I'm going to start off with running back, and I think I'm a little concerned. I don't know if concern's the right word. I'm a little worried about the overall effectiveness of the Carolina offense this week with Will Grier. We saw what we had with Josh Allen, and Christian McCaffrey was still able to do everything that he could do. But I don't know. I think the floor is, it's just we don't know what could happen with Will Grier when we already knew what was happening with Kyle Allen. So while I have no problem playing Christian McCaffrey, I'm taking the price savings, and I really like Saquon this week. He had that high ankle injury, and he just came back way, way, way too early for it. He's a beast, and he wanted to sort of suit up through it, and the coaching staff let him. But he finally looked back last week. He was elusive, breaking tackles. Now, it was against Miami, right? Whatever. But, hey, this is against Washington. It's the same damn thing here. They're 29th in PFF rush defense this year, looking at a whole scale. And I actually had you pull this up. They had the 6th lowest single game grade on the season last week at PFF. I don't know how many, a lot of games, right? 200 something games so far in the NFL this year. And the Redskins just put up the 6th lowest graded run defense game last week. He was looking healthy. They're giving up the 6th most fantasy points to running backs over the last 4 weeks. They're allowing the highest percentage of pass attempts to running backs in the league as well. That feeds into his skill set. I just think this is an absolute smash spot for Saquon. I'm taking the price savings. I know CMC's been amazing, but I think Saquon's definitely too cheap this week, Daniel.
I can see that. I'm not as worried about McCaffrey as you are, just because I don't see how Grier can be reasonably worse than Kyle Allen has been, and that's not hurt Christian McCaffrey. But I can totally see the argument for the savings and going to Barkley. I don't think there's any problem with that move.
All right, talk to me on McCaffrey. Of course, he's like the stud of the week.
Yeah, it's there's 2 ways this game can go for Carolina. They can toss Grier out there and say, "Hey, throw the ball a bunch, and we'll see what you can do." And if he's doing that, odds are he's going to be throwing at least some to McCaffrey, because if you're in his shoes, throw the ball to this guy who can do everything. Or they say, you're out there because Kyle Allen is so bad we can't keep running him out there, but really all we want to do is have McCaffrey run the ball down their throat. Either way, I just don't see how McCaffrey doesn't get infinity touches in this game. He's going to get so much work. I think that's pretty much the whole argument.
Yeah, I pulled up, I use the blitz projections as sort of my main thing from Derek Carty here at RotoGrinders. He's got about a 5.5 point lead over the next highest projected running back on the slate so far. So if you're looking for a ton of fantasy points, you can use CMC, the 10-1. It's a little bit of a discount from what we were getting at 10-5 earlier in the year. But I don't know. I'm really high on Saquon at 8-3, and that looks like someone I'm going to be putting some of my hard-earned American dollars on. I want to let you talk about Joe Mixon. I think we both agree on this. I think one of the things the Bengals are doing to lose is what's the most effective way to score points in NFL is to pass the ball. And they've decided to lose. They're just going to run the ball all the time with Joe Mixon. And this is against Miami. I mean, this is as good as it gets, right?
Yeah, they've allowed the most points in the league. And since week 10, Joe Mixon's the number 4 fantasy running back. He's number 2 in PFF rushing grade and overall running back grade. So he's actually turned it on lately. People have forgotten about him because his early season was so bad. But he's been totally worthwhile lately. And I don't see any reason why that won't continue here.
Yeah, even when they're down, they're still just running the ball because I think that the coaches got the memo. They're going for Burrow and they're running the ball. We don't need to see Andy Dalton throw the ball because guess what? He's not throwing the ball for us next year if we get that number 1 pick. So, the Mixon, he's 6,600, right? Like if you play Saquon or CMC with Mixon and then you play, let's say, who do we get? We got DeAndre Washington of the Raiders is going to be the value play of the week now that Josh Jacobs is ruled out. So you can make all those. Imagine if you play them with Will Grier. You can play Michael Thomas too. I mean, you could just make some really fun teams this week. So keep your eye on Mixon. I think he's going to be a key cog in a lot of my teams. A couple other players I want to talk about. I want to talk about Adrian Peterson with Geis headed to the IR. Old man is still strong at the end of the season. He's going up against the Giants. Giants run D is actually halfway decent, 8th in PFF run grade on the year, the 3rd in rushing success rate allowed. But Adrian Peterson don't care about your PFF grades, Daniel. I'm sorry to tell you that. He's going to get the ball, 15 to 20 times, I think, in this game. And if it's close, they're not going to have to go to Chris Thompson or anything like that. He'll catch a couple of balls, too, not completely dead in PPR. I think AP, what is he? He's at 5K on DraftKings. If you're looking in sort of the mid-tier, seems like a pretty strong play to me.
Yeah, I mean, they've been, other than the games guys came back, they've just been feeding him the ball constantly this whole season, since Callahan took over. So I don't see why it's going to change now.
See, he could be on a roster next year?
Why wouldn't he be?
Yeah. He's still playing good, right?
I wouldn't want him to be a featured back, but if as this insurance policy like it was this year, I don't see any reason why not to.
Yeah, I think some team. There's a lot of good running backs coming to the league, but I think
doesn't he have a 2-year deal? I mean, isn't he still under contract for next year unless they cut him?
Yeah, I haven't looked at I haven't gotten into my best ball mode where I'm looking at all the contracts for next year yet, but that'll be an interesting one to look at. I think he'll be on a team somewhere for sure. Real quick, DeAndre Washington, Chalk City, currently projected at 40% ownership in your favorite large field, low buy-in, GPP, anything. He's 4K on DraftKings. We saw this earlier in the year, 21.6 DraftKings points, 14 rushes, 7 targets. He got into the end zone as well. It's against the Chargers. Both these teams have nothing to play for, but you got to think DeAndre Washington should be worth that 4K price tag pretty easily.
Yeah, it's hard for me to have any argument against him. I made my list for our little shared sheet before the news came down, so I didn't have a chance to add him. But yeah, it's all the workload, low price. Hooray! I don't have much to add to that one.
All right, give me a couple other value runners. You had a name. I didn't even realize this guy was possibly returning here, Kerryon Johnson. Keep your eye out on him. And then you've got what I think is a really sneaky play. I won't ruin it for everybody here, but what do you got on Kerryon?
First, we don't know for sure if he's coming back this week, but they haven't ruled it out. That he's been in practice. They've been talking about bringing him back. So who knows? But assuming he's available to him, they're not going to play Wes Hills or Bo Scarborough or any of these guys over him if they have a choice. He had 15-plus points per game, or average 15-plus points per game in the 4 games before his injury. It's a long shot. It's obviously a long shot, but he's cheap. He's got a chance to play this week, and you got to like him. He's still such a good player. And the other one is Devontae Freeman. Playing the Jaguars, that matchup looks great. The Jaguars' defense has fallen apart lately, and they're what are they 7-point favorites against them? They're going to be running the ball.
Yeah, Gridiron IQ on RotoGrinders, right, is lighting up Green, and Green's good for the offense. It's Green on the Jacksonville defense. They're allowing the second most fantasy points to running backs in the season. The first, the highest over the past 4 weeks. You look at some of the rush stuff. It's like Christmas over here. 3rd in rush yards, 4th in success rate, 5th in expected points added, in EPA allowed on running plays. I mean, Freeman looks really, really sneaky this week, and with guys like DeAndre Washington, and we'll have some money to spend up. He's 6K, right? So the price tag's not that great. He looks super sneaky, so he's someone I'm certainly going to try to get some exposure to this week. Anything else you want to talk down on Zeke? Looking at some projections, Zeke projecting out pretty well. The Tony Pollard stuff last week, right? That was all in the second half when Pollard got a lot of his run. Why are you hating on Zeke so much?
I mean, he's fine for cash. He's always going to have his workload. I just worry about his upside for tournaments in a game where you've got to think Dallas is going to come out throwing as much as they can against his Philadelphia defense. We've seen Amari Cooper light up Philadelphia over and over and over. I think it's going to be a big Amari game that could lead to a little bit of a downtime for Zeke.
Hopefully, Dak's shoulder isn't too hurt, and that passing game will come to fruition. There's a lot of what if. Something to stay tuned for injury-wise as we roll through the rest of the week. All right, that's going to about do it for the running backs. I want to jump into Scott's expected fantasy points article, one of the key things on PFF. If you're ever looking to try to get a good read on some fantasy articles, you've got to summarize. You read through all these and make sure all the T's are crossed and the I's are dotted and all the stats are correct. What do you got for me in here that we can kind of look forward to for this week?
Well, the Bears actually have one of the league's best 1-2 combinations at receiver over the last few weeks. Since Taylor Gabriel got hurt, Allen Robinson has been the number 1 receiver in expected fantasy points per game. Anthony Miller's been 7th. In terms of actual points, it's 3rd and 11th for those two guys. So they're both lightened up. There's nobody else on this offense. Tariq Cohen's not doing anything. Taylor Gabriel's not back. Trey Burton's on IR. So it's just these two guys, and it's really working for this team. I know they're not on the main slate this week, but if you're playing anything that includes Sunday night, I like both of these options.
Yeah, you got a nice little note here, too. So I play like the Saturday through Monday slates, like all the games. Give me every single game. Give me as many opportunities for my opponents to make mistakes here. And there's a note from Scott. Miller runs a lot of his routes on the slot. Kansas City's best against outside receivers, but bottom 10 versus slot. So if you're looking for a sneaky play and you can get access to some Anthony Miller, take a look at that. I think that was one of the big standouts for me as well, reading through the article. What else is in here that you want to? I don't see a flow chart. He's got Jacob Hollister in here. We all knew that. We'll talk about that later. But what else is standing out?
I know everybody's talking about it, so it's not exactly a sneaky topic, but Tyler Higbee's so interesting. He has 100 yards in 3 straight games, only tight end do that all year long. Now, we don't know for sure if Gerald Everett's out for this week, but assuming he is, as you know, it's not a great matchup against San Francisco, but I still love Tyler Higbee.
Yeah, I think I saw that Everett was practicing in some form of a limited form. I don't know if he's going to play, but that is I don't know how do they not just give Tyler Higbee the run when he's got 3 straight 100-yard games? Coaches do stupid things. Who knows what they're going to do? But I don't think Everett's going to get his starting gig back. I think this is Higbee's now.
I'd be curious if they just go 2 tight ends so heavy, and we see less Cooks, less Kupp. Yeah.
All right, let's jump back into the position by position. And let's go to wide receivers. There's a lot of good ones this week. Actually, a lot of the good ones are actually off the main slate, and some of them have even been injured. What do you got for me for the Saturday slate, right? We've got Woods, Kupp. Kupp had a couple weeks ago, he only played a real limited amount of snaps. Last week, he kind of jumped back up in snaps there. What are we doing there? We just need all the ownership's going to really concentrate around that Houston-Tampa Bay game. We got to try to find somewhere to be different in tournaments.
Yeah, and I'm interested in both those two guys. The 49ers have this impression as being this ridiculous defense, and it's been a very good defense all year. But the last 2 weeks, only Indianapolis and Carolina have allowed more fantasy points to receivers since this 49ers team. Part of that was Richard Sherman was out for one of those games, and he's expected back, so we'll see. But either way, this is not quite the stout defense that we'd expected for most of the year. They have a lot of injuries. Woods is 4th in targets per game over weeks 10 through 15, 3rd among receivers, at least 9 every single game. So Robert Woods is getting a huge workload. That makes him very appealing to me.
Yeah, keep an eye out if you're trying to get a little different on that Saturday slate. Don't just – we all like that Tampa Bay-Houston game, but try to think a little bit outside the box, a 3-game slate. There should be some really big leverage spots, in my opinion, if you're playing the tournaments over there. To the main slate – all right, I got to talk Michael Thomas. I mentioned I like to look at the blitz. You see the number, but Michael Thomas is currently projected almost 10 fantasy points more than the next wide receiver, which basically when that happens, he's just going to get put into every single lineup if you go by projections and things like that. And it's really hard to argue against it. 9 of his last 10 games, you've got road games, you've got home games. You've got Teddy Bridgewater, you've got Drew Brees. No, you've got rain, you got sleet, you got snow, you got a dome, you got good weather, bad weather. It doesn't matter. 9 of his last 10 double-digit targets. You just don't see that. Tennessee's allowing the 8th most passing yards on the season. And what I really like is if Drew Brees even gets breathed on, I'm going to be surprised in this game because the Tennessee gets no pressure and New Orleans gives up no pressure. This is like the absolute – Brees is going to have all the time in the world. If you want to take a flyer on a Traquan or a Ted Ginn getting deep on one, I think you can maybe even do that this week. I just love Michael Thomas. I know it's outdoors and Drew Brees splits don't look good, but I don't even know if that matters for Michael Thomas.
I said earlier I was down on Breeze, but that doesn't filter down to Thomas at all. I don't know how the only reason you wouldn't use him is because he's expensive. But even at that, he's been worth it so many times. Yeah. He almost single-handedly knocked me out of my fantasy semifinals last week. So it's just use him every time.
The Saints are, Sean Payton, he understands, right? We have Michael Thomas and Drew Brees, and we have Alvin Kamara, and we're going to get them the ball, over and over and over and over again. And you just think more coaches would just get their best players the balls more, and the Saints actually understand that, and Drew Brees gets it. It's mind-blowing that is still an edge in the NFL, that you just can't get your best player the football as many times as possible, and the Saints have figured that out. You want to talk about Amari Cooper, and I would have loved this because, right, I saw some things on Twitter too, right? The lineup of cornerbacks he's been facing this year is insane. Now he gets to go against the Eagles, which is like the most cupcake matchup at all. This Dak shoulder injury is a little concerning. I got to see how that plays out. But, if all things are go for Dak, on a Sunday morning report or something like that, I'm all in on Amari this week.
Yeah, ownership might be a little off of him. He's averaged under 10 points over his last 5 games. He hasn't topped 100 yards since week 10. People might be scared off a little bit, but man, this Philadelphia defense, we've seen, last year he had, 230 yards and 3 touchdowns against them. This defense has allowed the most points to outside receivers 3 years in a row. Amari Cooper is going to take advantage of that thing. Dak Prescott's injury is the only concern. And it doesn't concern me much. I think he's going to be fine.
Another guy I like is Keenan Allen, 6,300. I think that price is probably a couple hundred too low. He's very consistent, and I know Mike Williams is getting some hype. But Phillip Rivers, he's still going to throw the ball. He produces just about every single week. Allen hasn't shown the huge ceiling that I think we really want out of our receivers, but I think somewhere inside of him, the ceiling, it's just waiting to burst out. Maybe it happens this week against Oakland, who's basically just going to be giving up on the season. And I guess I would expect Oakland to probably do that more than like the San Diego offense. I still expect them to try to prove they have some good talent out there. 5 straight
San Diego, huh?
Yeah. Oh, geez, the Chargers. Yeah, what are they're whatever team comes into Los Angeles Chargers, because the stadium just gets taken over. But I like Allen. I just think 6,300 is a little too cheap, and maybe more of a cash game play because he hasn't posted that huge ceiling. Like I said, I think it's still there. But if you're just if you're looking in that range for the last guy or two in your cash game, I think I'm gonna get on board, Mr. Keenan Allen.
Yeah, I love him as a cash option. I'm right with you on that.
A couple value plays. I didn't even realize this. We both wanted to talk about Steven Sims. This is what it's come to. If we're looking for cheap plays, I think we could play Greg Ward as well here. What do you have for me on Sims?
Well, it's just out of nowhere. He has 18 targets the last 2 weeks. That includes 11 last week. 14 million targets in that time. I mean, there's nobody. Trey Quinn's on IR now. Paul Richardson's on IR now. They don't have any tight ends. They don't have. Chris Thompson's not doing anything in the passing game. So it's Terry McLaurin and it's Steven Sims somehow. And at the price tag he is, which is essentially zero, you can't go wrong.
Yeah, and I think you can go back. I don't think Nelson Aguilar is going to be back in play for Philadelphia. And if we like the Cowboys offense to score some points, they're going to have to pass the ball on the Eagles side as well. And you got Greg Ward probably looking, to possibly repeat his performance from last week if you're looking for a couple of value plays. You want to get a little bit off the board in value. You got another one. You got a Lions receiver. So let's talk about Danny Amendola.
Yeah, well, David Blough's had 3 starts, and in those starts, Amendola has 29 targets. Kenny Galladay has 20. No other Lion has more than 12, and no other active Lion has more than 10. Blau has had eyes for those 2 guys and nobody else. And Amendola has done more with them other than that one quarter that Galladay had on Thanksgiving. And Galladay is likely to see a lot of Chris Harris Jr. this week. So I expect Danny Amendola to have, at the very least, a whole lot of targets and a whole lot of receptions. Maybe his yardage isn't high because he's just not a big yardage guy, but I think there's a lot of upside there as far as the receptions go.
All right, I want to talk Terry McLaurin. I like the over. I talked Daniel Jones. I talked Saquon Barkley. Now I'm going to talk Terry McLaurin. He's the clear number 1 wide receiver out there. Haskins looks like he's starting to get a connection back with him again. The Giants' 4th worst pass coverage grade as a team, 7th highest expected points added as a defense on pass plays. They just let Janoris Jenkins go. He's actually been good this year, so who knows what this team's going to look like in the secondary now. McLaurin looks like he's primed to score this a deep touchdown, maybe catch 6-7 passes along the way this week. So I think McLaurin. What would you rather have? I think McLaurin is right around that Keenan Allen price range. It might be $6K instead of $6,300. McLaurin or Keenan Allen on a cash team? I think it's very clear who you want to turn.
Cash team, I want Allen. Tournament, I want McLaurin.
Yeah, let me see here. Let me make sure I have these prices correct. I always like to double check. Yeah, McLaurin is...
Yep, $100 difference.
Yeah, $100 difference. So I think it's pretty clear. Allen... I don't know. You can convince me to play Terry McLaurin in a cash game this week. I
don't think it's huge either way, but I think if I'm leaning, it's Allen for cash, McLaurin for tournament. But I wouldn't fault anybody who argued with me on that one.
All right, bring the fire. You got a couple of duds here, and these have been some very, very popular DFS plays over the past couple of weeks.
Well, Devontae Parker, he's actually skyrocketed in price now. He's up to the 6th highest price wide receiver. A lot of that's because a lot of big receivers are off the slate. But regardless, that's an expensive receiver. For him to hit 3x scoring, he's got to get to 20 points. Only 2 receivers have hit 20 points against the Bengals all year long. There was that Cooper Kupp 220-yard game in week 8, and then there's Deebo Samuel in week 2. And that's it. The Bengals have not allowed a lot of points to receivers. So I don't think there's a lot of upside to Parker this week.
And then DJ Moore, was it the quarterback situation got you feeling a little vomity in your mouth?
That's most of it. It's just I just worry how much upside there is with Greer, and I think maybe this is just me buying into that sort of narrative, but I feel like if he is going to pass it a lot, it's going to be mostly to McCaffrey and Greg Olsen, and I worry about the Moore and Samuel part of things. So it's more fear than anything else, but the fear's there.
All right. Tight end Saturday slate. I have pulled up our projected ownership. Take a guess. George Kittle early. This is the algorithm taking over, right? There's no human interaction. Guess George Kittle's ownership for the 3-game slate.
Good Lord. 70.
60. It's at 60% right now, which I think is probably a smidge too high because I think a couple of the other guys are going to gain some steam, namely, especially Higbee if Everett gets ruled out or, Higbee's going to retain a starting role. But what are we doing at this position? Kittle, Higbee combined eating up about 65% of the ownership 75% of the ownership on the early round.
Yeah, you can't use a Patriots tight end because they've done nothing. Matt Lacoste is getting 2 points a game. Benjamin Watson 1. There's nothing there. Dawson Knox has not done much for Buffalo. Darren Fells had that big hot stretch for a while, but he hasn't topped 2 receptions of 24 yards since week 8. Jordan Akins has done even less. We may see O.J. Howard pop with all these injuries in Tampa Bay, but unless you're using O.J. Howard, I don't know how you can go away from the Higbee-Kittle combo or Everett if he's back. Otherwise, it's just throwing a dart and hoping, and I don't love doing that.
Yeah, I think there's 4 tight ends I would play on the slate. It would be Kittle. It would be Higbee. I would not mess with Everett even if he plays, and I think either one of the Tampa Bay tight ends is certainly viable. I think Howard and or Brait got 7 targets last week. Everyone knows O.J. Howard revival. It's our final week in best ball, right? We're going to recoup all of our losses all season long on O.J. Howard, and we're going to get it in DFS this week. But if you're looking to get different, don't be afraid to play Brait. He's $500 cheaper than Howard, and he could easily see more targets than Howard this week. So let's go to the main slate. I'll let you talk about Zach Ertz. Are you concerned that because there's basically no receiving options, Miles Sanders is probably the best non-tight end receiver, I think. I think Ward's a little overhyped. He had that late touchdown last week, too, that sort of got him there. Are you concerned the Cowboys might just, double, triple coverage Ertz all game long and maybe that slows them down? There's just nobody left in this Philadelphia passing game.
I mean, that hasn't stopped in the last few weeks. I don't know why it would start now. Since week 9, he has 9 more targets than any other tight end, 18 more targets than the third place tight end, and he had his bye in that stretch. It's just, he was a little disappointing early in the year, and that has absolutely evaporated. He's getting a monster workload. There's no reason why it won't continue. And yes, maybe they double, triple team him, but I think you take that risk.
All right. So I've seen these charts on the internet. They're called a flow chart. Or you can see graphs like when should you play a tight end. It's always against Arizona. We've got Jacob Hollister. He's coming in at 4,200, and he's not even like a scrub. Getting 8, 6, 3, 4 targets. Over his past 4 games. Hasn't gotten into the end zone recently. I mean, if Ricky Seals-Jones, right, can get 2 touchdowns against Arizona. What is Jacob Hollister going to have to do? I like Russell Wilson. I think there's a lot of ways to play this Seattle offense this week.
Yeah, I mean, it's the flow chart. Hollister's going to be an interesting play. The only downside is the flow chart is no secret, and everybody knows it.
So we've got the chalk play at tight end. Looks like it's going to be Austin Hooper, right? We've got Calvin Ridley out. We've got a Jacksonville team that I thought had given up on the season, but now there's like the late season. We just fired Tom Coughlin revival, and everyone's going to try real hard for the coach or to put some good tape out there. He's looking really popular, and you can look at a lot of statistics against Jacksonville tight ends. They're really bad at covering them. What are we doing with Hooper? Just really hasn't done anything since he's come back from injury.
Yeah, that's my worry. Is he was absolutely on fire before he got injured, but since he's come back, he has 5 receptions for 52 yards over 2 games, and I'm just not seeing it right now. I think this is going to be a big Devontae Freeman game. I think Julio Jones will keep producing. I don't want a lot of Hooper this week. Maybe I'm crazy.
Yeah, it's just something I'm going to have to reevaluate. I mean, you got Hunter Henry, who's just disappeared from the Chargers offense. I don't think that's going to keep that way. I think he's slightly interesting. You've got Ertz and Waller and Andrews and Jared Cook. I think you can – there's quite a few tight ends I think you can play this week. But, Hooper looks like he's going to be really chalky. I've been doing my series all year long on, like, the large field tournaments. If there's ever, like, an extremely overweight owned tight end, that's basically an automatic fade. Now, it's not worked every time you've played against Tyler Higbee in the past couple of weeks, but in theory, you should really be fading those type of super high-owned tight ends. They just usually don't get there unless their name's Tyler Higbee. One other guy I wanted to point out is Mike Gesicki. You liked Ryan Fitzpatrick. And Gesicki, right, we just want a couple – if you get like 4 or 5 targets for a tight end, right, you're in play. He's got at least 7 targets in 3 of his last 4 games. That does it for me. It's against Cincinnati. You mentioned they're not allowing teams don't pass against them, but let's be real. It's because they're getting, beat every single game and teams can just run on them at will. Patrick Layard, Myles Gaskin, are these guys really going to run all over Cincinnati? Maybe not. I think it's going to be a Ryan Fitzpatrick show, and I think Gesicki is perfectly viable. 3,600 saves you a couple bucks off the higher owned options. I'm assuming you can get on board with that.
Yeah, he's a little interesting. He's very touchdown or bust. He's only topped 51 yards twice all year, but if he can get into the end zone, he's definitely worth it.
All right, let's get out of here. Give me talk to me on Jared Cook. Give me a value play, and we'll get on out of here.
All right, Cook, I like. He had 9.4 points last week, which is not bad. It's not great, but it's also his lowest points since returning from injury. He's top 10 every other game since then. He was disappointing early in the year with Teddy Bridgewater, but man, since he and Breeze have been together, it's been more than fine. And then I'm a little interested in Caden Smith. Now that we know Evan Ingram's done, he's not coming back. Smith is averaging 5.5 targets over his last 4 games, and Washington has allowed double-digit points to the tight end position every game since their bye. Smith's the only game in town for the Giants. He interests me.
Yeah, Cook. I mean, you get 9 fantasy points in a game as a tight end. You're crushing it in DFS in this day and age. So I like Cook. Very consistent until that last game, and at 5,000, looks like he has a pretty strong connection. It's Michael Thomas, it's Cook, and it's the running backs in that totem pole of targets for Drew Brees, and it's just a really concentrated offense. So I can certainly get behind him. All right, I think that's going to do it. We'll round out one last week. We're going to be talking about players next week that you probably haven't even heard of all season. So week 17 DFS is always fun. There's a lot to pay attention to in terms of team sitting, and we'll have a really fun show last week. Daniel might not make it. We might have a guest appearance from that other guy at PFF that used to do the show. We'll have to see how that plays out. But hey, Daniel, if this was the last show you do with me this year, buddy, I've had fun. And if you come back next week, let's go out with a bang. So thanks to everyone for watching this week. Hopefully you guys have fun on Saturday. A really nice slate of games everywhere out there. And I think Saturday, if you're a tournament player and that Tampa Bay game just doesn't really go to script, you can really get an advantage if you try to get some leverage off of that game elsewhere. So we're going to get out of here. It's late. Daniel, we're going to bed. I'm Brit, and we out you.